I am Henley Alexander Hunter. I was born on May 27th, 1944 in Shreveport, Louisiana. Well, my father was born in Pineville and my mother was born in Arkansas, but they lived in, they both basically grew up in Shreveport. I went to public school in Shreveport. I went to South Highlands Grammar School, Broadmoor Junior High School, and Byrd High School. And then I went to the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville and graduated in 1966 with a degree in history and English. And I returned to Louisiana to go to LSU Law School, and I graduated from there in 1969. Actually, I wanted to be an architect, and I went to the University of Arkansas. I didn't want to go to LSU, I thought it was too big. And when I got to the University of Arkansas, and this was in 1962, they told me I needed to have registered separately with the School of Architecture, and I had not done that. And so I said, all right, I'm here, I may as well stay. So I got a degree in history and English, which I loved history. And I think too, there was a time that I might have gone on and become a history professor or something like that. But law was the family profession. And although my father was not a lawyer, I had two uncles that were. And so as it turned out, turned out to be the fifth generation of lawyers in the family, and my daughter's now the sixth. But an architect, a history professor, or a lawyer, and I wound up to being a lawyer. My first year out of law school, I clerked for the Second Circuit Court of Appeal in Shreveport. And I had been hired to be Judge Gladney's law clerk. And I don't remember Judge Gladney's first name, but he hired me to be his law clerk, and then he retired. And they appointed Judge Richard Blanchard Williams from Natchitoches to fill his slot on an interim basis. And he was a really fine man to get to know. And then I practiced law went to work for a firm in Shreveport, one-man firm. His name was Robert Emerson Eatman Sr. And I stayed in that firm for 17 years. And it was a very small firm. I was appointed to be a bankruptcy judge on July 31st of 1987, but they didn't have a place to put me. They created that judgeship by the result of the 1986 legislation that did a wholesale lot of amendments to the bankruptcy code for Chapter 12, and they didn't have a place to put us here in Alexandria. So I had an office in Shreveport for the first year, and we did not move our house until December of 1987. But first year I had Judge Tom Stagg's old office in Shreveport, which was quite palatial, I might add, and it was a neat place to, and oddly enough, Judge Stephen Calloway was the bankruptcy judge appointed to Shreveport, but they needed, the mid-1980s brought a lot of financial hardship to Louisiana as well as around the country, and they needed more bankruptcy judges, and they created a new judgeship. And so, although I had applied for Judge Calloway's position in Shreveport, I did not get it. But the next year, I went through another interview process with the same panel. The panel that interviewed me both times was Judge Henry Politz, who was on the Fifth Circuit at the time. He later became the Chief Judge of the Fifth Circuit. Judge Earl Veron from Lake Charles, district judge, federal district judge, and a lawyer from Lake Charles named Spike Schofield. And they had the same panel both times. And that was interesting, because I wondered what I did wrong the first time. I do remember one story. Judge Callaway had had people write letters to the panel to recommend him for the position. And I had had only one letter written the first time around. And at my next interview, Judge Veron asked me, he said, "Why am I getting all these letters about you?" And I said, well, when I went through the process the first time, I had one letter, and Judge Callaway had more letters, and he got the appointment and I didn't. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, can you just stop the damn letters? And I stopped them after that, and I got the job. But I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gotten the letters. It certainly drew their attention to me, we'll put it, which I guess was a good thing. I got the job. My wife's name is Kathy Virginia Norris. She was born in Shreveport, but she grew up in Bossier. And we met in about 1984 on a blind date on Friday the 13th. That should have told me something, I think. But at any event, we were married on March 1st, 1986. I did. I actually started out sitting in Lake Charles, and I sat in Lake Charles from 1987 until 1992. I also sat in Judge Donald Bowe had been appointed to the bankruptcy judgeship in Opelousas, Louisiana, which had been occupied previously prior to his appointment by Judge Bernard. It was Judge Rodney Bernard. And so Judge Bowe died early, serious illness in 1991. And I went to Opelousas and sat there. I also sat in Shreveport from time to time. And then Judge Wesley Steen had retired or resigned from the bench in the Middle District of Louisiana. And I sat in Baton Rouge following his resignation. And then I also handled the incoming judge at that time, and that replaced Judge Steen, was Judge Lewis Phillips. And many bankruptcy judges have traveled around the country, have filled in different courts. I did not. I confined my sitting to Louisiana. Then after Judge Bowe's replacement, Judge Gerald Schiff, was appointed, I went to Monroe, and Judge Callaway and I continued to share Monroe from 1992 until 2015. There was a case out of Monroe where a lawyer, it was a public figure, he had been the district attorney. His law firm became involved in financing a new office building using proceeds from a bond issue. And he somehow became concerned that the law firm, he and his law partner said, in his opinion, violated the law. So and they had taken out a loan. This, in my recollection, could be partly off the actual facts, but he took the funds from the lawyer, the operating account, not the trust account, which would have been absolutely fatal, but he took it from the operating account, he paid off the loan, and without telling his law partners, and they sued him, and they got a judgment, and he could not post the appeal. So that money was gone, so he got money from his mother to cover the cost of the appeal. And instead of trying to do a suspensive appeal, and for reasons that I don't understand, he testified that he put the money in a barrel and set it on fire. And then he realized this was perhaps not a good idea. So he put deer corn on top of it to try to stop the burning. And then the whatever residue, he could not explain whatever happened to the residue. Well, no one particularly believed this story, and although he was pretty, he apparently told it enough that he made it sound semi-credible, maybe. I didn't believe it, and his creditors didn't believe it. The United States trustee didn't believe it, and they took him to trial on lying to the FBI about what happened. And at trial, they supposedly recreated the burning of the money and demonstrated, of course I wasn't involved at that level, but they demonstrated to the jury's satisfaction that his version was not credible. Well, certainly Judge Williams I consider to have been a mentor. My law partner was certainly someone who taught me how to handle vast quantities of paper. And but I think I must have been sort of a loner, but certainly on the bench there were people who helped. When you, Judge Politz, for example, you could go visit with Judge Politz about something that was troubling you. Judge Norman Scott here in Alexandria was always very helpful, and D.G. Drell. And it was, and bankruptcy judges helped each other. You could rely on a network of what do I do with these people, you know, and but in terms of professional mentors, I think Judge Williams would have been. And then another mentor, although I did not know him as a lawyer, was my grandfather, who practiced law both here, in Alexandria, and then in Shreveport for many years. And although I knew he died in 1961, and I was still in high school, but I've always considered him something of a role model. I was appointed and I retired in July 30th, 2015. It's been an interesting experience. I wish I could do it again. I miss it terribly, but it's time for somebody else to take that job, and but I really miss it. And, some days it would be nice to have just one more day on the job. Well, I hope to be remembered as a fair judge. Everybody loses in bankruptcy court. Everybody has lost before they got there. The people who file because their plan didn't work out, and then the people who loaned them money extended them credit. So everybody lost. There's no real winner, and there's no real loser. It's a much more humbling experience across the board. But I would hope, and you know, I'm not going to say I got it right all the time. I don't think you possibly can. But I would hope to be thought of as having been fair, not play favorites. That was a big thing with me. I mentioned the trustee in Lake Charles who thought he could tell when I made up my mind. I don't know how he did that, but that's the way I'd like to be remembered.